to this computer. Okay, there we go. All right, everybody, thank you for joining our monthly meeting today here, October 15th, 2020. Very glad to see so many of you able to join us here over the lunch hour. Hopefully it's a fairly convenient time to hop on and catch up with Power BI and get some learning in. Today's agenda is very simple since it's just a 11:30 to 1 o'clock meeting. We're going to hear from Vearl Tolbert from Chesapeake Energy, PMP as in Project Management Certified Professional. And he's going to share with us some tips about how to use Power BI to power up your projects. After that, we'll have about half an hour where I'd like to cover some of the latest releases with Power BI. September and October turned out to be a fairly significant month because of the Microsoft Ignite conference and other announcements that I think they stored up for that conference. And then I'll share with you some other resources and info about next meetings and things like that. So, so with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Vearl to you. Vearl and I had the pleasure of working together at Chesapeake Energy for several years, where I got to know him and of course like him, and I know you'll like him too when you hear him today. He's going to be speaking on how to use Power BI to power your projects. So during the day, he works at Chesapeake as a project manager, and he's responsible for managing the company's surface equipment data. He's been in oil and gas for 10 years and recently discovered the benefits of leveraging Power BI to support projects. And that's exactly the kind of presenters that we love to feature here in this group as just people, you know, sometimes it's nice to really dive in deep with someone who uses Power BI and that's their main job. But also it's great to hear from people who, hey, their main job is to accomplish something else and see how they use Power BI to accomplish that. So when he's not doing that, you might find him playing some jazz saxophone, like you just heard at your favorite restaurant or jazz lounge. So with that, please help me welcome our presenter, Vearl Tolbert. Vearl, I'll turn it over to you and you can share anytime.
Thanks, Brent. Let me get my screen set up here. Okay, are we getting video now?
Yep. Yes, sir. We see your slides.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, community. Thank you for having me, Brent. Thanks for the introduction. And we'll dive right in. So I want to start off by taking you back to December 2016. That's when we were going through an ERP implementation here at Chesapeake, and we decided to go with SAP. Now, I don't know who all on the call has been through a ERP implementation, but these are huge, huge projects. I mean, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars spent. And it would, of course, change the way the entire company did business on a day-to-day basis. In particular, it would change the way 800 plus of our technicians went about their day-to-day work, how they requested and paid for maintenance requests. And of course, the benefits of doing a project of this size is, you know, to reduce costs and increase efficiencies among the company. And it certainly did that. However, at the conclusion of the project, I was asked by my leadership to craft reporting that would help tell the story on how SAP was benefiting Chesapeake and our group. And I'm going to be honest with everyone on this call. I had no idea where to start with that request. So on my talk today, what I'd like to do is share with you what I wish I had known back in 2016. So that will include a few tips that I've kind of picked up over the few years in trying to really address that question that I was asked those years ago. But before I dive into that, I do want to just share a little bit more about myself. You know, as Brent mentioned, I am highly involved in projects here at Chesapeake. My role as an enterprise asset management coordinator, but it's sufficient to say I drive SAP projects for specifically, it's called the plant maintenance module. And so I'm essentially responsible for ensuring that Chesapeake knows all things equipment data, how much it cost and where did it go. And there's a lot of processes and tools that are necessary to be in place to execute on that initiative. And so I do a lot of projects around kind of that scope of data. I've been in oil and gas for it'll be 10 years here in December. So good career there. My background is primarily project management, business analysis. But as I mentioned, I've been dipping my toe in the water in the business intelligence region because a big part of what I do and to succeed in this role is the data and telling that story. But as Brent mentioned, if when I'm not doing that, playing a little bit of saxophone, I've been doing that for over 20 years, and chasing after my 3.5-year-old. He'll get you if you don't add that half. And so I've got a beautiful family here, as you see pictured. So enough about me. Let's take you back to 2016. So my leadership had come to me. They said, we need reports that'll tell the story on how we're doing with our investment in SAP. And the good thing that I did have going for me, although I didn't know where to start, was I had an idea of what was not working, what were the processes that we needed to address. And really the goal was to identify, what was the next project that we needed to tackle based on how far we had come after the implementation. And I was really struggling because I was explaining and showing charts of what would support what I would think would be the next logical step, to ensure that we're getting the full ROI. However, I was met with mass confusion. It just was not resonating. And to really give you an idea of kind of how I felt, I've got a quick short video that I want to share with the community, because it really does kind of tell how I felt when I was trying to explain, kind of the direction I thought we would go. I'm going to see if this will queue up properly. This will have some audio, so you want to make sure your audio is up.
It's just, there's all this pressure, and sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless, and I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. All of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
So that that video, I think, is pretty classic for one, but it also really does kind of set the context for how I felt when I was trying to explain the direction we would go. Again, I was putting together charts, and it was just met with mass confusion there, and so I was completely failing, as Thomas Edison would say. However, maybe I wasn't failing. I was just finding the many ways that didn't work when trying to explain what I felt would be the next project. And one of my issues, it was the charts that I showed up to the leadership team with. This is a bit of an embellishment, but my initial charts that I crafted, they had different colors. There was a good amount of terminology that were ERP specific terms, and it caused confusion, and it didn't look too much different than this image. And so it was not really benefiting my cause and trying to persuade and explain where the next dollar should be spent to ensure that we were getting that ROI. And so as a result, the first thing I'm going to say is the first thing I wish I had known in 2016 is this idea of quays. This is something I learned from BI expert Bill Shander. And essentially, he says that you should ask yourself these 3 questions before you build any chart. You should first know what your data is saying, what your audience needs to hear, and know what you really want to say. In particular, knowing what the data was saying. Again, we were relatively new to the ERP system, and so we're still learning the data structure and how that data would output to put it into a report. Also knowing what the audience needs to hear. This I thought was interesting because what I discovered is that, and I'm sure for many folks this is primitive and obvious, but it was not for me. But this idea that your report and the visuals on that report may differ depending on the audience. So for instance, our executive team who was looking at this data set, they wanted to see something totally different than the ops team that was much closer to it. And I couldn't use the same types of reports depending on that audience. And so this is important to identify up front before I started building my BI reporting. And then, of course, what did I really want to say? Really needed to have, in many cases, a bit of an agenda, kind of an idea of where I was wanting to go and the supporting charts for that. And so this is definitely the first thing I wish I had known back in 2016 when we kicked things off. Another issue that I ran into when trying to develop these reports and craft this messaging was that it just took entirely too long to pull all of the data and to mesh it into one place so that I could present what needed to be showed to the executive team and to the ops teams. I mean, I was in SAP and I was having to export various transaction codes out of SAP and the various different reports in SAP. And there were data sets that were in Excel-based formats that I was needing to mesh in from the ops team. And then there was project data that I also wanted to include. And it would take between 2 and 5 hours to get all of those data sets into one place and then get them formatted so that I could present the report in a format to which I thought was the most appropriate for the teams. And so this is where Power BI showed up as a great solution to that. And so this is kind of around the time where I discovered Power BI, which is really early 2017. And it was a huge benefit to help reduce the number of steps. Obviously, being able to pull from those multiple data sources and mesh things and build at one time was a huge time savings, and gave that visibility to the teams that were actually looking at those reports. So there was a big help there. But that was certainly a challenge and something I wish I had known about much sooner than I discovered Power BI. But even once I discovered Power BI, another challenge that I ran into was getting my hands on the SAP data. I had a difficult time getting access to getting connected to the HANA data structure. So for those that aren't aware, don't have SAP, HANA is essentially SAP's proprietary data structure or database. And I was having a difficult time getting Power BI to connect to that because, of course, that would save me time, and we wouldn't have to load in that data. We just connect right to the true data source, which was in HANA. We had some views that were built in HANA that we could use. And what I discovered is that there was a bit of a prerequisite that I wasn't aware of before we could connect to our on-prem HANA database. And so we essentially ended up having to install this HANA client plugin onto the local machine that I was accessing Power BI desktop from. And voila, we were then able to finally connect to HANA. And so here's it's a short video of kind of walking through the get data in Power BI and getting to the HANA connection. What's nice is Power BI has a ton of connectors, of course, but these are kind of the steps. And so you just put in your HANA server name. You may have to get with your IT infrastructure team to identify which port that your HANA instance is sitting on. But what's nice is once you are connected, you'll have access and the ability to essentially connect to any of the views that are housed out there on the HANA server. Something to keep in mind is that, and this is something I discovered, but we also have reporting that's basically built with a BEX query. And this is somewhat SAP terminology, but I discovered that those reports were not accessible, on the HANA database. And so we've had efforts to where we've had to expose, some of the views that were only just in query format so that we could pull them in to Power BI and do some of our reporting. So just something to be aware of there. Another time savings and something we discovered is really the benefits of using an enterprise gateway. Discovered that the enterprise gateway was a great way to essentially get our reporting and in particular our project reports to auto refresh at a certain cadence. We initially started off by using a personal gateway. However, transitioned to kind of getting a kind of an enterprise gateway set up for our reports, which is great. And again, a huge time savings because prior to this, I had access to the data structure. I was hitting the HANA views, but then I was having to, prior to the enterprise gateway, I had to actually go in and refresh those reports, either weekly or whatever cadence that was needed for the reporting. So the enterprise gateway is definitely something that helped to save that time. And I've got a quick video here of kind of me setting up our enterprise gateway settings here. And so essentially, in Power BI Web, you can just go to the data sets and data flows section, and then you ultimately click on the ellipse to get to the settings section. And then from there, that's essentially where you can go in and build out your gateway connections. We work with our security team to get a service account set up so that the entire company, assuming that they've got access to those data structures, to that data set, but ultimately they can build out their report. If they're using a data set that already is that's been authorized for internal use, they can essentially select the service account user as the authentication user and then set up, as you see here, just whatever refresh cadence that they like. And so in this case, for this particular report, we're just refreshing a couple of times a day, every 12 hours. Huge time savings, and have gone from between 2 and 5 hours before Power BI to now this thing essentially runs itself, which is huge in the scope of kind of managing and maintaining these reports. That was a big thing for us. So essentially, I've talked through kind of my journey with getting access to Power BI, learning it, going through setting up the automation to connect using the enterprise gateway. So now what I want to do is I want to transition into more of the project side and how I've used Power BI. I'll talk about how and why I like to restrict access to reports to help with project management documentation. And then I've also got some screenshots from our project management operation group that they've done some neat things in Power BI to help communicate, enterprise-wide projects and status there. So one of the things I like to do when I kick off a project is I love to generate, even before we do the kickoff meeting that's gonna really start the project. I love to do some type of activity report or some type of report where where I can share this report right after the kickoff, so that the project team has access to a report that they can pull up and kind of get a gauge and see how the project is progressing. So for this particular example, we're working a project, this Vearl Tolbert project, and essentially it's an application that we're rolling out to our various business units. And what I like to do is I built out this activity report that essentially will show the number of users that have engaged with the application itself. It's connecting directly to an Azure SQL database, and so it's all in the cloud, and so it's able to pull on demand. And it's nice because I send this out and I set it up to share to the original group of stakeholders that that requested to be informed on the project. And then ultimately, I include a link to this report when we do the kickoff meeting. And then as I'm sending out, weekly or however bi-weekly updates on the project, I always reference my activity report. And then what I see often is that the report will get shared because they will begin to see, there's certain activity that they can see in the report itself. And when they share that to others, if that person that they shared it with isn't, wasn't included in the initial access of the report, I get notified by Power BI. And I like that because it provides an opportunity for me to either reach out to that particular user that's wanting access to the report so that I can update my project documentation, because they may now need to be a stakeholder that I just missed at the initial kickoff of the project. And so I've discovered that a big part of having a successful project is just making sure that the right folks are involved. And so this is one of many tools that I use, or one of many ways I should say that I try to make sure that I'm getting all of the folks involved in project efforts by kind of restricting to who I know are the stakeholders that requested to be involved, and then kind of depending on other stakeholders to share the report to help me identify others that should be included. So that's one tip that I use for project management there. Okay, here's an example of an enterprise scorecard report that our enterprise team is using. I think this is really neat. More of an enterprise view of projects that are being driven. You can kind of see in here, the project status, who the primary stakeholder is or the sponsor, and you can really cycle through, the different enterprise initiatives. And this is awesome because really anyone in the company can power up this particular report and get a gauge for maybe some project effort that they are involved in or that's going to impact them, and more importantly, really see who do they need to contact if they need more information on these project efforts and get a brief description. So this is just an example, so maybe to spawn some ideas there.
Vearl, I don't want to throw you off track there, but I'm curious about that last report. Is HANA the base for that report?
So that report is not out of HANA, that particular one I showed. That's a good point. That one, I think you're referring to this guy here.
Actually, the scorecard, the enterprise scorecard report.
Oh, that's a good point. I did want to mention that this particular report is using a software solution called ServiceNow. which is Microsoft solution, and it has a project management module in it. I know that Power BI has the project online solution, but I just want to, I guess, make it clear we aren't using that particular module. We use ServiceNow, and it has kind of some project management capabilities there that we're leveraging to use this particular report. And I think it's just sitting in an on-prem database. Okay, here's another kind of another visual of what's being pulled from, again, our ServiceNow solution, which is kind of managing our enterprise-wide projects. Every good project management report has to have a Gantt chart, and so we're no different there. And really do like the Gantt chart by MAQ software, which is what gets used here. I'd love to hear in maybe some of the attendees in the chat. I'd love to see or hear about any other visuals that you found handy. If you could throw those in the chat, I'd love to review those after the meeting. If you found some, but this particular one is MAQ software that we're using there. Another visual that I like to use is this chiclet slicer, and so it's just kind of a filtering tool, but in this particular instance, we just use it to kind of identify what's high, low, critical on the priority list for projects. But again, just another opportunity. Love that audience feedback in the chat on what you all are using in your respective areas. Okay. So here's something that I've recently discovered, and I'm sure it's been there the whole time, but I just kind of stumbled upon this. But the capability for conditional formatting, I know this is definitely in Excel, but just did not realize it was in Power BI as well. But it's a really neat feature, in particular from for uses that I have, in that conditional formatting, we can set up things. So for in this particular example, this is set up to have a count on the number of defects that we've identified. And so, for instance, we've got some conditional formatting that says, if we're between 0 and 3 defects identified in the count, we're still green. But if we're between 3 and 6, we've got the yellow triangle there to kind of identify those. And then, if we get 6 or more defects, we're starting to get in the red diamond, and just a neat way of kind of getting some additional visuals, indicators, some signals to kind of give an indication of how things are going on the project. And again, I'm all about kind of that on demand, for the stakeholders, that they can jump in here and really kind of see, maybe even before I'm aware, if we've got challenges going on the project there. To set that up, it essentially looks like you can do that just about on any count values. And so once you click that, you'll have the option to do the conditional formatting option. And so it looks like you can do that. In the example I just showed you, those were icons. And it's got the different colors for the icons that you could use. But it looks like you can also do it for font colors and kind of the background colors. Again, very similar to what you get in Excel. To really highlight areas of concern or high risk, which again is really important. And I like it also because, in my standard status reports that I provide to the different stakeholders, I'm a big fan of just keeping things simple. At the top of a status report, kind of using the stop sign, very, very primitive, overall project status, yellow, red, green. And so this keeps me consistent, and I can use that same, kind of type of signaling for the reports as well. Okay, so I'm starting to wrap things up here. I want to just do a kind of a quick recap of some of the things I've talked about. This idea of, again, knowing your whys. Again, super primitive and very basic, but again, for me, was a huge kind of epiphany of this idea of really doing the work up front to know what you want to say and who's going to look at that information before you craft out your reporting. So a big one for me. Also, one of the biggest ways that I've found that using Power BI and generating KPIs or metrics is really, it's a great way for me to build support for new projects. It's a great way to communicate or at least have a discussion on areas of concern, and you can kind of find those opportunities, for the business. And so that's a big one for me as well. Again, I talked about this, but really, this idea of kind of on-demand reporting, for your sponsors. Again, going back to that example where it's an activity report of usage, and so the key stakeholders can just dive right in and see if if anyone's using the product, and then we can meet, or we can have that discussion accordingly based on what we're seeing. As always, reports, they also encourage accountability. I think one truism for anyone in the BI world is it's difficult to expect what you don't inspect, and have certainly found that to be true. And so I do try to craft out some type of metric or KPI that'll measure project progress, because it seems to go a long way to really identify issues before they become major issues, get them early. And then again, as I talked about a little bit earlier, this is another way, a neat way, an automated way to help me identify other project stakeholders that really should be involved. Maybe they just missed the initial project kickoff meeting. Maybe they're new employees, whatever the case, but you get your project team involved and engaged in the reporting, and they will help you, even if they're not aware. They'll help you to identify other stakeholders that could really help increase the success of your project, and Power BI can help with that as well. All right, so as I conclude, please reach out. I'm very, very open to kind of continuing this discussion, even offline. I know we're going to have time for questions, but I just want to definitely kind of put it out there that you can certainly find me on LinkedIn, and would love to hear what you're doing in your respective companies around how you use Power BI for projects in particular, and favorites on visualizations, whatever the case may be, or if you saw something in my presentation that you'd like some more insight on, I'd love to have that discussion with you. Thanks. Brent?
Thank you very much, Vearl. That was really, really excellent. I know we'd give you a big round of applause if we were there in person, but I'll just virtually say thank you on behalf of everybody, and say, yeah, at this time we definitely have some time for questions. And so if I believe everybody has the authority to unmute themselves, but if you have a question at this time, feel free to unmute and ask and dive right in. If you'd rather write it in the chat, that's fine. Feel free to do that too, and I'll read it out so we can all hear it. I can kind of get things started off, if you don't mind, Vearl. I saw that you were using ServiceNow, you mentioned, for the project management module. And so did you were able to connect to that database as well as HANA and others? Like, was that a fairly easy experience, or did you kind of need help with each new data source you kind of needed to acquire?
Yeah, I needed a lot of help with the HANA, like I talked about a little bit earlier, researching that plugin. The ServiceNow piece, I kind of outsourced a lot of that. But what I've discovered is if it's on-prem and it's not SQL, it seems like there's some challenges there. But for ServiceNow, it was pretty easy because it's it's kind of a standard SQL database. Like, again, it's a Microsoft product, and so that worked well to kind of get it up and going.
Great. Well, I'll pause for. Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, I'm a IT compliance and audit manager. So, and a lot of my data is like static per day. It doesn't change a whole lot. But one of the things that I noticed on your reports was that you base things a lot the same off the same as I do, off critical, high, low, medium. When you created your conditional formatting, did you incorporate that status with what you're considering, green, yellow, red?
That's a really good point. And it really does depend on the data set. If I'm really good and if the project warrants it, that's the type of discussion I like to have up front with everyone involved, is to kind of get that, set those expectations and say, this is these are the stage gates, if you will, of when we need to start escalating, particularly around like defects. But in this particular instance, I think it was kind of a swag. We kind of exposed it to the, this is really one built by our IT team, or like I said, our executive team. And so there wasn't a lot of discussion to say, yep, these three, that's green, and it just kind of took a swag at it. But there are instances, yes, where we pull in all the different parties and actually kind of spell that out and document it, so that when we throw it on the report, it's reflective of the decision we made up front.
So, Vearl, I'm interested, whenever you were tasked with coming up with a way to visualize, how are we getting ROI from our SAP HANA? What was it that led you to Power BI? And kind of a follow-up on that, what was it like for you, just kind of the learning curve on, using Power BI?
That's a really good question, and kind of allows me to dive into a little bit more of that journey to get to Power BI. So what really happened for me is right after the SAP engagement, I was kind of placed on the special projects team, where we were tasked with really diving into some of Microsoft's, I guess just the full-on Microsoft stack. Chesapeake is by far Microsoft shop. And so we were essentially visiting the different business units and capturing the different challenges that they had, and then coming back and as a team, and then trying to identify how the Microsoft stack could help address those. Even took a trip down to the MTC, Microsoft Technology Center, down in Texas, and they demoed amongst a whole host of things Power BI, and it's just a really neat kind of introduction to how we could address these challenges. And one of the challenges that we had was getting our reports on a platform that could support mobile, that could support a mobile view of things. And if anyone's aware of any company that's in oil and gas, you'll know that the BI tool of choice for most oil and gas companies, and we were no different, with Spotfire, typical product. And it didn't have that mobile piece. And so really, it's kind of a confluence of that separate effort to address just in general problems that we were having. And then at the same time being tasked with driving forward to help with the SAP ROI and crafting reports for that. That's when I discovered these capabilities of Power BI, and what set it apart from for instance, the Spotfire tool that we were using. And I have to be honest with you, after I left the Microsoft Technology Center, I was fired up. I was like, this is exactly what I need. I was throwing out my business challenges, and Power BI would answer those. But of course, when I got it back to my lab, back to my individual computer, and started kicking the tires in Power BI, I was quickly kind of humbled at, just it's very different. So it took me a good while just to get used to kind of getting the data in. The probably one of the big things I discovered just in learning Power BI is the sensitivity to the data itself. You really have to clean up your data, if you will, in a lot of ways. At least I felt like it's kind of a judgment call, but I felt like the data had to be pretty clean for you to really leverage Power BI to do the visuals that you wanted. And so there was some back end work that I needed to do, and kind of had to get familiar with even just the Power Query tools to kind of transform data before I could get the visuals I was really after. So that probably took me the longest, was just that, just coming to that realization, so that I could ultimately get what I was after. But that's kind of a short view of kind of how I got there, and some of the challenges I had getting up to speed.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll thank you very much, Vearl. I think we'll wrap up our
Pleasure.
question time there. And was that you who said something, Vearl, or somebody else? Okay, I think that was you. Okay, sorry, just making sure. But hey, thank you again for taking time to put that together for us very much. And I know we all learned a lot from seeing that. Yeah, I certainly picked up some good tips, and I know many other people did too. So thanks for your time, Vearl. Really appreciate it. What did I hit? Oh no. Oh, good. I'm here. Never mind. Okay, sorry. I thought we'd accidentally ended the meeting, but we didn't. Good. We're all good. Shoo. That was a close one. Okay, so with that, let me transition on into what's new with Power BI, because I know this changes a lot every month, and so it's important that we cover it as frequently as we can. And I always like to look back a little bit, because if you're not reading the blog every single day, it's very easy to miss stuff. So we have to deal with it in large areas first. So dealing with just Power BI desktop, looking back to the summer, now you can do hierarchies in your slicers. That's a neat thing that you might want to try out if your data is naturally hierarchical, like I pick company and then a division and then an area. You can put all of those levels into your slicer and let people select the whole group or just the single kind of leaf in the tree. It's pretty neat that way. They did more things like external tools was one of my highlighted features. So if you end up doing a lot of Power BI editing, I definitely recommend checking out the external tools, especially Tabular Editor, which we had a presentation on 2 months ago. And at the end of the slideshow, we'll share with you the YouTube channel where you could go see that. Alex Powers show how to use that. Something I should mention is that I definitely will make all these slides available, as well as put this on YouTube. So you'll be able to get these slides as a PDF if you want to go back and figure out what all these things represent. In August, a lot of good stuff, but one thing I might highlight is you can go select data points within the chart. So this is not just selecting many visuals at a time, but selecting. Let's say you have a chart with 12 months, you could pick the 3 months by using a rectangular select kind of tool and export just that data or filter down to just that data. So that's pretty neat. Probably worth checking out if you deal with a lot of CSV files also, this text or CSV by example. So this is a Power Query feature that will let you, when you are importing your CSV data, you can already create columns by examples, but now you can kind of say, oh, hey, that column's actually a date as you read it in. Tell it how to transform it by example. Okay, it looks like, 2020, 10, 15. Well, that really is October 15th, 2020. You teach it that, and if your CSV is consistent enough, then it will know to apply that rule. So September was a very big release. We met, I believe, on the 17th of September, and the Ignite conference started the next week, and they announced a lot of stuff. One of the biggest features I'd highlight is this smart narrative. If you haven't seen this, it's a very neat feature where you can teach Power BI how to write dynamic text that responds to your data. So if you had a chart that showed last month we were here and this month we're here, you could teach the text box to say sales increased by 50%. That would be great, month over month. But that text would change based on what the actual values of the data were. I have a short video showing how that works here at the end. They added more rectangle select for data points to different chart types. At first it was like just the bar chart and line maybe, but now it's in more there. This third point, it's a subtle point, but kind of a helpful one. If you've ever had overlapping visuals, and you kind of get frustrated when you accidentally click on the one behind and it jumps to the front because it's selected. Well, now under the general settings in the options, you can say, I want to fix this Z value, this layer for this thing. So even if someone selects it, it won't jump to the front. It's really nice for background elements that you want to leave in the background, maybe images sometimes, or even text boxes that when they jump to the front, they overlay your visuals that you really don't want them to do that. So that's kind of a nice thing. It's almost like a little lock the background type of option, but you have to set it per visual right now.
Hey, Brent.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Sarah Langford.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I see that we're still looking at the PowerPoint. Would you be able to show us as it sounded like you were trying to show us where we could do it, and I wasn't seeing that.
Oh, gotcha. Yes, absolutely. I have a demo for Smart Narrative here in just a second. I didn't have a demo for each one, but where you can find this is, I'll pull up the Power BI blog post that really outlines all of these features, and we can look at those together, actually. That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just describing them. Pictures worth 1,000 words, you're right. I just kind of like to give a little summary because sometimes it's hard to know from the title, well, what are they talking about there? Yeah, and really, you know what, in the future, I'll try to just throw in a picture for each one because that's really helpful. And then October, we haven't seen the release yet. It would not surprise me to see it come out next week, probably. Let me share my whole screen here. There we go. So what that fixing looks like is total label search. There we go, maintain layer order. So that's what it looks like in the options, but it will basically stay in place rather than being brought to the front when it gets selected. So that's what that one does. Another new feature is this, that when you hit publish in the September version, this little box at the top is new that lets you search for a workspace, which is nice if you have a lot of workspaces or groups that you're still a part of. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was, yeah, total labels for Stack Visual. So it really is this picture here that I know in the past, if you turned on data labels, especially in a stack bar chart, it would show you the labels inside of each of the slices. So right in here in red and purple, they would be kind of stuck there, but you couldn't really show a total label right in line with your bar. Well, I guess now you can, so that's pretty nice. I don't know if you can do both or if that would be confusing, but that'll be an option in the September release when you upgrade to that.
I'm pretty sure that the value for each slice will still show up in a tooltip.
Oh, and a tooltip. Okay, good point. So the Power BI service, even more, a lot of the updates come in here too. Some things that may be important to our group, they improved Snowflake connectivity in June, and automatic page refresh is a big deal. These things, so there are some new options. If you're using Power Automate, you can create a task to export a Power BI report. Maybe you'd use that task to export the report and then maybe email it to someone else as a PDF or PowerPoint. If you're starting to use deployment pipelines, those went to GA, which means general availability. Basically, they're available. They're not a preview feature anymore. I put this little plus sign next to it to mean that's a premium feature only, unfortunately. And then just some other neat things that you can check out from the blog post. But one of the big announcements from Ignite, if you are a Power BI Premium customer, was they're kind of doing what they call Generation 2 of Power BI Premium. And they are trying to add greater scale to it, is one of the big announcements. So as they upgrade you slowly over time to Gen 2, you especially nice things might be, you might be able to create auto scale. So in the past, if you were a premium customer, you said, okay, I'm going to have a P1. That's the lowest level of premium you can buy. But if you started getting overloaded, there was no automatic, trigger to go get more while I need it and then scale back down. It looks like they're working on that to treat it more like all the other dynamic kind of Azure resources, instead of such a tell me what you need up front, design time, capacity kind of stuff. And then really just upping the scale, no limits on refresh concurrency, fewer memory restrictions. So they're really kind of figuring out how to do that. One of the other big announcements that I think I have mentioned later, yeah, I'll come back to it, but they actually mentioned they are going to have a premium per user license. So more to come on that here in just a minute. So far in October, just a few things on the service side. If you use Google BigQuery, better connector, some better authentication options to SQL Server, especially. I think that's for like if you're using Azure SQL, that kind of thing. So just like to touch on those things. If, in case if you aren't a user of that, it's probably like, okay, I don't know what we're talking about here. If you are, it'll set off a flag and go, whoa, I need to look at that because something happened that I might be interested in. So the mobile app, they did some better mobile authoring experiences. So if you are using the mobile app in your organization, you might check out for the latest version. You can do bookmarks, you can pinch to zoom better and things like that, but no updates in October so far. More to come on that, I'm sure. And embedded, I didn't note too much, except that there's an updated HoloLens app. If you're a HoloLens user, I don't know of any of our groups who are. And then, but this one would be a bigger one, that they are bringing Power BI into Teams more and more. And like there's a Power BI app. I think there's also basically, if you have to manage the licensing side of this, there are some ways I think you can use Power BI in Teams and not necessarily have a pro license. I don't want to get into all the details of that right now because it's super confusing, but using Power BI inside of Teams is very smooth. You can, like in your chat, you can add a tab to the top of the conversation and kind of have this report always in context, chat about your reports, all that kind of stuff. I've done that, add a Power BI tab, and it's very neat. It's neat to kind of see it all in context. So here they are inside of the Teams app. You see your Power BI pages on the left and kind of seamlessly go back and forth. So kind of neat. For Teams users, of which there are many more these days than there used to be. And this is a subtle thing, but might be worth mentioning. They talked about improved MDX performance. So Excel, there's the Analyze in Excel option. So you can pretty much treat Power BI like your server and query from Excel, get results back. I always found that worked really well if your data set was very summarized, but if it had a lot of details, it tended to be really slow. They say they have improved the performance. I haven't actually tried it out, tested it out much yet, but if you rejected Analyze in Excel in the past because it was too slow, you might try it again, never know. And they continue to kind of more tightly integrate Excel with Power BI. So here's a quick, this is a little embedded video of this smart narrative feature. Of course, if you want to, read the blog posts and the YouTube videos about it, but it's like you're dropping a text box on your page there, and you are describing kind of in natural language, which is kind of neat, what you're trying to say on this text box. And you can drop and see how there's certain lines there that are underlined in blue. Those are calculated values or possibly conditional values that you are displaying as you go along. So to me, this interface is kind of complicated, but also very powerful if you need to just, some people are like that, like, okay, yeah, the chart, they should be able to read the chart and see what it says, but sometimes you just need to tell them, like, it was up, it was down, it was good, it was bad, or maybe further explain what they should be paying attention to. So definitely check out Smart Narrative when you get a chance, because it's neat. It's in preview right now, so you do have to turn on the feature in the options.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of times just adding that text really helps with putting your visuals in context of the story that you're trying to tell. Back to Tolbert's quiz, helping people understand what is the story that we're trying to tell with this report, what is the message that we're trying to convey. Just having a little bit of text there helps, and then the smart narrative moves up the value chain there by allowing you to have that dynamic text. So that's, like you said, Brent, very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, probably we've all been tempted to add a text box but thought, well, if I put in that text box and the data is going to refresh and then my text box is stale. So this will let you do that. And I think you could treat it either as, okay, start with my very basic chart and read the text box for details, or you could think of it as read this text box to just, hey, I'm an executive. I need it in 7 words or less. Okay, 7-word summary of what's going on. And if you want the next level of summary, then look in the chart, and see what the trend has been. Maybe. Pretty neat feature. And then, yeah, premium per user. So as you probably know, or if you've at all been around choosing Power BI or the licensing, you've either had to be a premium customer, which was tell us how much capacity you want, and then you can put as many users as you want on it, or a per user, which is what Power BI Pro is, kind of license. So if you were a big company with a lot of users, premium made a lot of sense. The trick was just figuring out how much capacity you needed to buy and pay for. If you were a smaller company and you were like 4,000 a month, then Pro made a lot of sense because it was only $10 per user per month, and it kind of could grow with you. And but you didn't get some of the cool premium features like this. Let's see, per capacity per user. Well, like these larger data set sizes, how many times you could refresh, all these kinds of things. Deployment pipelines, new features, XMLA connectivity, meaning you can use a lot more tools with the Power BI service, those kinds of things. Well, they're going to have an option where you can buy that per user. So I'm sure it will cost more than $10 per month per user, but they haven't told us how much more yet. My guess would be they would stick it somewhere between that $10 point and if you translate it out, what would be 100 users would be 4,000, so, or 400 users. So they'll pick some price point, that makes sense in the middle. Pretty cool option for small and medium businesses though, for sure. So again, they haven't announced that it's not actually available to buy. They haven't announced what it costs, but there is a blog post here about it coming. And I think they have said by the end of the year, they'll be telling us, what it's going to be and how much it'll cost. So pretty neat. Okay, before I jump, any other questions or thoughts? There's so much that happens even in a month's time. Things that I should mention, or things you've discovered recently you want to share with the group?
I've got something.
Great. Hey, Brandon, go ahead.
So as you're aware, I am a contractor with a software as a service provider who works for various small government agencies. And we've been looking at Power BI and recently found Power BI embedded. The concern comes from the fact that we work for all these small government agencies. It would be a lot of work and kind of on a customer by customer basis that we'd be able to get any sort of confirmation that they'd be willing to use that government cloud option that Power BI and Azure offer. Have you heard anything about an on-premise sort of embedded Power BI to where we could add that to our software through an on-premise download of Power BI for each individual customer and their copy of the software that we sell?
I haven't, but has anybody else? The only embedded I know of kind of it has to use their cloud as far as I know, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what we saw.
So Brent, would the Power BI report server be an option to do embedded if they were going to do it like? I mean, so Brandon, can you're wanting to embed a Power BI report into a portal of some kind, or where are you wanting to embed this, like SharePoint or?
It would be within the software that we sell. We'd have reports page, and the report would be attached into our software as a permanent part of the software that we sell.
Mm-hmm.
So all the customers who would agree to it, pay for it, would have it included in their software package.
Gotcha.
Because most of the customers do the exact same things, and a lot of them are the exact same size, so they often need the exact same reports.
Okay. Yeah. So assuming that you guys, and Brent, you can jump in here too. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. But assuming that you've got multiple customers that are going to use the same report, you could embed that in your application and use row level security to control which customer is going to see what. That would be my thought on how you might be able to achieve that.
Yeah, that's a thought. Yeah, I might be curious too. I don't know if they're all on today, but I know we have several customers who do use Power BI report server, and kind of hear how they have embedded reports into either their own applications, but I guess in this case, custom applications especially. It's a good question. I don't know what the embedding experience is like, but if it would still give you essentially code for an iframe, you should be able to. I mean, it's not the most seamless, solution technically, but you could embed that iframe into your application, I would think.
The real, I think, switch that would make moving into Power BI easy for us would be being able to tell our customers that nothing has to go into the cloud.
Okay. Yeah.
That's just the kind of customers we work with.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
The report server's really, Power BI report server's really your only option.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that just has a different, it has a different delivery method. It comes in quarterly packages, and the server and the embedded capabilities have to be delivered at the same, and the desktop have to be delivered together. So you can't have one getting refreshed. It's not like the service where it just kind of is updated. So and there are going to be some features that are not going to be available there just because it's an on-prem environment. Things like data flows, things like some of the advanced analytics. So you're just, there is a comparison of what you can and can't do Power BI report service on-prem, server on-prem, sorry.
Now, so
it's licensed by SQL Server. So if you have SQL cores, you can have unlimited user access to it.
yeah, if you have maybe a link that I could look at on that, I'd really appreciate it.
He's showing it on the screen, I think.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll send this to you. I think this would probably work here. Yeah, Brandon. It's yeah. Again, it's kind of an iframe, and this is showing you how to do it in SharePoint. But I think you could do it in your own application just fine. You know. Yeah, you just got to get that code there, right there, that iframe code. You know, but this has to obviously be the right string for their server and their report. But it would. I think it could work. I'll send that to you.
There's been a tremendous amount of work with the government, just FYI, in the .gov, Azure and Office 365, all of those components. So we're meeting more and more regulatory compliance there. So depending on which branch and portion of the government, you know, there may be some openness to evaluating those services because they are hardened specifically for .gov.
They're all small local governments, and because of that, it's definitely going to be situational, and each one will be different. But we've definitely had a few prospects that have mentioned an interest in it, and that's why I brought up the embedded, because that's what seemed most logical and most designed for that use. But yeah, it does rely on the government cloud from what I could tell.
And it looks like the you know, the SSRS SQL Server Reporting Services has been around for a long time, and it's very much sort of baked into Report Server. If they had that, there are some more controls for embedding those reports into applications. It looks like that have been, you know, since it's been around so long, into a .NET app, you could kind of bake or make that report, that SSRS report, look like it was embedded in your app using those controls. Just some ideas. So
okay,
yeah, for developers. There you go.
If you could drop the link that you have pulled up either in the chat or somewhere, you know, I'll get access to it.
You got it. Yeah, no problem. I'll make sure to send it to you. Thanks for asking that question, Brendan. That's a good one. Okay, great. So with that, let me mention our next few meetings and some upcoming events for sure. So if you want to watch the Microsoft Ignite replays, that was in the end of September, and there's a link that in the slides where I'll upload them to our user group site that you can jump right into those replays. I think that link, as I tried to embed it, focused just in on the Power Platform sessions, and there were still like 50 or something, so probably more than you can ever watch. But a lot of good content available to get the very latest on what people are doing in the Power Platform. For a more high-level view, you could watch the recap of this business applications launch event. That's very much probably more executive level focused, but it gives a great summary of here's what's new in the Power Platform and here's how you can actually use it in business, right? Lots of use cases and customer testimonials, and also a shorter event, also a shorter video. So might be interested to see that. And then as far as upcoming events, there's going to be a community conference, October 22nd. Goes pretty much all day, 8 to 5 Central for us, and you can find information about that here. So a little more user oriented, I think, and I think also they're literally doing it, seems like, as an opportunity they mentioned for reflection. So it's like, I'm drinking from a fire hose here, guys, you know, how pause a little bit and help me get caught up on what's the latest, right? So if you can make some time on the 22nd, that's probably a real good opportunity to hear and see the latest in action. Then I just wanted to mention that as I post video, I do kind of share these videos, and here's our YouTube playlist. So it's both things, you know, that Microsoft's posting, sometimes some guy in a cube stuff, or Reed Havens does great videos. And then of course our sessions will get posted to this channel too. And you can subscribe. Some of you have. I always feel flattered. It's like, hey, I have like 10 subscribers. It's awesome. I did want to mention, and they asked me to mention, that since we're kind of part of the Techlahoma Alliance, and many of you work with other technologies besides just Power BI, they asked me to mention that there's a Django Fest coming up. Django is a web serving or web server type of module that's Python based. And it's like a Saturday session. So if you've been thinking how to get into Python or Django, this is a pretty cool free session where you can learn it on a Saturday and kind of boot camp yourself up to speed. Pretty cool. And then just to remind you that Techlahoma's out there. They have a great active community on Slack. And if you're interested in plugging more in, especially, you know, virtually during this time when it's harder to meet in person, with the overall Oklahoma technology community, they're a great group to do that with. Let's see, our next meeting is going to be a big one. Thursday, November 19th, 1 week before Thanksgiving, if you can believe it. This should be 5 weeks from today, meaning Thanksgiving is 6 weeks from today. So don't panic. Then it'll be the larger kind of quarterly format where we have multiple speakers. Two we already have lined up are Denisha Malone, who comes from the Memphis area, and she kind of goes online by the Power BI Queen. So she's a lot of fun and I know you're going to enjoy hearing from her. We also have Mike Carlo lined up to speak, who is really the brains behind this powerbi.tips site, which is a cool site if you haven't checked it out. And he's also a really good speaker, very experienced in the whole Microsoft data stack. In between, we'll have fun, we'll play some games, and also we'll try to take a bigger look at they just announced what they call the release wave review, meaning here's what's coming up for Power BI and the Power Platform. So we'll focus on that, and that'll be kind of an all-day thing, November 19th. So you have a couple of opportunities to take a day off from work, get cleared from by your boss, and then just spend the whole day learning. It'll be great. Feeding your brain. I wish we could have actual food too. Yeah, and then we're on Twitter, and I pretty much just announced when we're going to do meetings, or maybe if there's big news, I'll put it on Twitter and some other resources for you. So I really should change this slide, not say enjoy the food anymore. I hope that you enjoyed this meeting, and again, I'll follow up with the slides and videos. And until then, please stay safe and keep enjoying using Power BI. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Brent.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vearl.
Yes.
Thanks, team. Take care.
Yeah.